Pot has been legal in Canada for just 2 weeks, and for many people, the debut has been a bit of a bust. In Ontario, over 1,000 complaints about the government's online pot store have landed on the provincial ombudsman's desk. In Quebec, chronic shortages have forced government-run stores to close Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and there are reports of supply problems in other jurisdictions across the country. So who's to blame? Were governments not prepared, or are there not enough producers or growers in Canada? Joining me now with a supplier's perspective is Terry Lake, the Vice President of Corporate Communications and Government Relations at HEXO. Hi, nice to see you again.
I told you 2 weeks ago it would all be very smooth.
So as you mentioned, you were here 2 weeks ago, I think almost to the day. 2 weeks later, the big prediction was that there would not be enough supply to meet demand. And what are you seeing?
Well, I think that's true initially. First of all, the demand has been, I think, beyond anyone's expectations. We saw this picture of people lined up in front of the SQDC in Montreal, and I think someone said, these are the most honest Canadians in the world lining up to buy cannabis in Montreal, where it's so accessible everywhere else. So I think there's been a factor, a novelty factor a little bit, but there was obviously pent-up demand for this, and it has been difficult to keep up supplies for a number of different reasons. The time crunch was very short in terms of all of the regulations coming out and then designing the systems, whether it was packaging, labeling, excise stamp issues. And then, of course, each province has a different distribution and retail system, and so producers had to manage each one of those separately. But SQDC is a good example, I think, of doing a very good job. They've opened 12 stores. When you compare that to British Columbia, that has one store in my hometown of Kamloops, they've got the online system, and the stores are very nice, and I think it's responsible of them to reduce the number of days that are open so people have the right expectations, and slowly over the next 2 to 3 months, I think we'll see this become less and less of an issue. But certainly is an issue in many different provinces. I think in Alberta, like 75% of the stores don't have enough cannabis. Same in Saskatchewan, the stores have had to close there. So it's not any one particular jurisdiction that is to blame. It's not any one part of this whole supply chain that is to blame. It's a combination of different things.
How imperative is it that gets fixed fast? And I ask because not just from the producer perspective, but the whole goal of this was supposed to be to weed, sorry for the pun, weed everyone off of the black market, right?
Yeah, but you look at Colorado, Washington State, California. California is the most recent example, and they still have growing pains. 9 months out, they're still dealing with some issues around supply, around quality, and things like that. Washington State has been legal for over 4 years, almost 5 years, and still 30% of the market is in the black market. So it does take time for this industry to mature. Obviously, we want to correct these problems as soon as possible because we want to create a reliable industry and that people have confidence in. But this isn't a 1 year, 2 year. This is a forever. The end of prohibition is forever. So it's going to take some time to get all the kinks out. You can imagine if we went from prohibition of alcohol to a legal alcohol system in 1 day. You wouldn't expect all the bars and the retail system to all be operating effectively the first day. And so it will take a little bit of time to mature. Producers like us are still building out our supply ability in terms of our greenhouses and growing facilities. Over the next 3 to 6 months, that will mostly be complete for most of the major producers. More producers are coming online through Health Canada, so that issue will look after itself.
Have the supply issues affected, for example, your company or other producers? Is it impacting, for example, the value of your stock or anything like that?
Well, the stock market is difficult to understand at the best of times. We saw that all of the stocks around the industry the day before legalization started to go down, and it's been in a bit of a tailspin, although it's stabilized over the last few days. But then the whole stock market has been going down over the last 10 days, 14 days. So I think again that's a short-term issue for us. Of course, it meant that we're working 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week. We've even had vice presidents on the line packing and processing and making sure we get our products out. So it is a challenge that is real, but I think all the licensed producers, all of the distributors, everyone that's involved in this industry is working extremely hard to overcome.
Quebec is talking about raising the minimum age there from 18, the legal age of purchase from 18 to 21. What do you think about that?
I think it's a terrible idea. You know, as a former health minister, I will say that it's a very bad public health policy, as the Quebec Association of Public Health officials have said as well. What you're doing is taking 18 to 21-year-olds, and instead of you know, allowing them access to a legal, well-regulated, taxed product, they'll go back to the black market. An unregulated product where you don't know how much THC or CBD is in it. You don't know if there are heavy metals or pesticides or molds in it. And the money, instead of going to legitimate businesses or government, is going to go to the Hells Angels and other organized crime groups. So it's not going to protect anybody, because we know that prohibition doesn't work. Canadians, young Canadians, are the highest users of cannabis in the world. So, you know, I know that it looks good politically, but from outcome-based measures, it doesn't make any sense.
And just quickly, I have a few seconds before I go, but Ontario's model at the time, I know there have been specific, we mentioned off the top there, the 1,000 complaints to the Ombudsman. You know, do you think that, I mean, I'm sure it's partly on the supply end, but also on the distribution end. It's only online right now, for example, and it seems like issues with Canada Post are affecting it. What do you think of what's unfolded there?
Well, I think it was a good idea to allow private retailing of cannabis. You know, I come from British Columbia, where I'm very used in liquor to a hybrid system of government and private. But I think private is a good system to have. And so over the long term, I think it's the right decision. But of course, they needed time with the election and then the municipal elections to make sure there was time for consultation and to get it right. So eventually they will.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mr.
Great.
Lake. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see you again.